It started as an ordinary evening, just another weekend when my friend Asher texted me out of nowhere, asking if I could come over. His message was casual, "Come hang out, the boys are here too," but something about it felt different. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it was the fact that he hadn't called me bro like he always did. Still, I agreed. I didn't know that this night would shift the way I looked at him, and at myself. When I reached their house, the air felt heavy with laughter and a faint scent of cologne. Asher's three cousins, Saad, Imran, and Daniel, were already sitting in the living room, the sound of a soft playlist echoing from the speaker. They greeted me warmly, though I noticed their glances lingered a little too long. I told myself it was just my imagination. Asher looked different that night. Maybe it was the way his shirt hugged his shoulders, or the calm, confident smile he wore. He always made me feel seen in ways no one else did, but I had never questioned why. Tonight, though, that feeling began to burn. They talked about random things, college memories, funny videos, failed relationships. I laughed along, but every time Asher looked at me, the laughter caught in my throat. There was something unspoken between us, something we both avoided naming. I tried to shake it off by focusing on the conversation, but the tension hung there, quiet and steady. At one point, Daniel got up to grab drinks, and Saad playfully said, "You two always stick together." His tone was teasing, but it pierced through me. I caught Asher's eye, and for a split second, he looked away, guilty, nervous, unsure. The silence that followed said everything words couldn't. Later, Asher asked me to help him move something from the storeroom. The house was dim, shadows stretching across the walls as we walked down the hallway. Inside the room, it was quiet except for our breaths. He looked at me not as a friend, but as someone he couldn't hide from anymore. I froze, caught between fear and something I couldn't name. "Asher," I whispered, but my voice broke before I could say anything else. He stepped closer, and I could see his chest rising, trembling slightly. "You don't have to pretend," he said softly. "I know." For a moment, the world fell away. The laughter from the living room faded. It was just us, two people standing in the middle of something forbidden, something neither of us planned. I didn't move. I didn't speak. And yet, the silence between us felt louder than words. I wanted to tell him it was wrong. That he had someone in his life, and I wasn't supposed to be here. But instead, I stayed. My heart was racing, my thoughts blurred. When he finally spoke again, his voice cracked. "I didn't mean for this to happen. But when you're around, I can't think straight." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just confusion. It was connection, messy, complicated, and real. And it was breaking every rule. We stood there for what felt like hours, saying nothing more. Then a sudden knock on the door startled us. It was one of his cousins calling out, "What's taking so long?" The world came rushing back, the weight of what almost happened pressing on us. Asher stepped back, his eyes full of regret. When we returned to the others, nothing looked the same. The jokes continued, the music played, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed forever. Asher avoided my eyes, pretending everything was fine. But I knew, and he knew, that one moment of silence had already rewritten everything between us. The next morning felt heavier than the night before. I woke up replaying every second in that storeroom, wondering if it had all been in my head, the look in his eyes, the unspoken words, the closeness that almost turned into something else. But deep down, I knew it wasn't imagination. Something real had passed between us, something we couldn't undo. Asher texted me later that day. Just a simple, "You good?" Nothing more. I stared at the message for a while, unsure how to respond. I typed "yeah" and deleted it. Typed again, "I'm fine." Deleted that too. Finally, I just left it on scene. For days, I tried to go back to normal life, but every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was him. And when it was, my heart ached even more. The worst part wasn't what almost happened, it was the silence that followed. The distance he built between us said more than any confession could. A week later, he invited me again, said his cousins were hosting another get-together. I didn't want to go, but I did. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I wanted to see if he still looked at me the same way. When I arrived, the atmosphere felt different. The cousins were cheerful, but Asher avoided my eyes. He laughed louder than usual, talked more than he needed to, like he was trying to bury something. I watched him from across the room, wondering if he felt the same guilt twisting inside me. At one point, I stepped outside to get some air. The night sky was calm, but my mind was chaos. I heard footsteps behind me, and when I turned, it was him. He stood there, quiet for a moment before saying, "I didn't know you'd come." His voice was lower this time, tired, maybe scared. "I wasn't going to," I admitted. "But I needed to know if that night meant anything to you." He didn't answer right away. His hands fidgeted, his gaze locked somewhere on the ground. "It did," he said finally. "Too much." I looked at him, searching for honesty in his voice. "Then why are you acting like it didn't?" "Because it's wrong," he said sharply. "I'm not supposed to feel this. I have someone. You know that." His words hit like a slap, but behind them, I heard the pain he was trying to hide. "You think I don't wake up hating myself for it," he added. The silence that followed was suffocating. The sound of distant laughter from inside made it worse, a cruel reminder that we were surrounded by people who couldn't know. I wanted to tell him that I understood. That love doesn't always arrive in the right form, at the right time, or with the right person. "I'm not asking for anything," I whispered. "I just don't want to pretend like nothing happened." He looked at me, then really looked. His eyes were glassy, his jaw tight. "You make it hard to breathe sometimes," he said quietly. "When you walk into a room, everything else disappears. And that scares me more than anything." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us hummed with something raw and fragile. Then, as if realizing the danger of what he'd just admitted, he stepped back. "We can't do this," he said, almost pleading. Before I could respond, Saad opened the door and called out, "You two okay? Come back inside, we're starting a game." Asher turned away, forcing a smile, pretending again. Inside, everything carried on as if nothing had changed. But I could feel his eyes on me now and then, quick, nervous glances that gave away the storm inside him. I laughed when everyone else did, but it felt hollow. Later that night, as I was leaving, he followed me to the gate. He didn't say a word, just handed me my jacket. Our fingers brushed for a second, enough to make my heart race all over again. Then he whispered, "Don't stop coming over. I don't know how to handle this, but don't disappear on me." I nodded slowly, not trusting my voice. I knew I was walking into something dangerous, a love built on borrowed moments and quiet betrayals. But I couldn't stay away. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to stay away, but his presence lingered in every quiet thought. I would pass by his street on my way to class, pretending it was coincidence, though I knew it wasn't. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected his name to appear. When it finally did, it was just one line, "Are you all right?" I stared at it for minutes before replying, "I don't know." He invited me over again, but this time the house felt different. The warmth that once waited inside was replaced by something heavier, almost cautious. We sat in the same room, yet the distance between us was clearer now. He looked tired, like someone carrying too many unspoken regrets. "I shouldn't have let things go that far," he said quietly. "You deserve a life untouched by my mistakes." I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to tell him it wasn't a mistake, that what we shared wasn't just confusion, but the words stayed trapped behind my tongue. He spoke about his family, about his wife, beginning to notice the way he drifted through their days. He said his son and my friend had asked why he seemed so distracted lately. Hearing that made something inside me twist. I realized then how easily a moment of truth could turn into a lifetime of guilt. I lowered my eyes, unable to meet his. The silence between us stretched like a wound. After a long pause, he reached across the table, not to touch me this time, but to place a photograph there. It was of his family, the three of them smiling, unaware of the cracks beneath. "This is my life," he said softly. "And you reminded me what it felt like to feel again. But I can't keep losing pieces of myself to what can't last." His voice trembled slightly, and I felt something break inside me. I stood, pacing toward the window where sunlight spilled weakly through the curtains. Outside, children were laughing in the street. Everything looked painfully ordinary. "I didn't mean to make things hard for you," I said, the words barely leaving my throat. "You didn't," he replied, standing behind me. "You just made me remember." We stood there in silence for a while, the air thick with everything we couldn't say. When I finally turned, there was nothing left to explain. His eyes told me he had already decided to end it, to bury this connection somewhere it couldn't destroy what he still had. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel his breath, then stopped himself. "Take care of yourself," he whispered, and then he smiled, a real, sad smile that carried both affection and farewell. I left without looking back. The door closed softly behind me, but the sound echoed louder than any goodbye. On the walk home, the streets blurred through the sting in my eyes. I wanted to hate him for ending it, but I couldn't. What we had wasn't built to last. It was a moment of truth in a world full of lies, a brief spark between two people who shouldn't have met that way. That night, I sat in my room, the quiet pressing against my chest. I thought about his words, about how some connections aren't meant to survive, only to teach. Maybe that's what this was, a lesson in the kind of love that asks for silence instead of promises. Weeks later, life went back to normal. My friend never knew, and his father never called again. But sometimes, when I pass by that house, I still feel the echo of that room, the soft light, the quiet voices, the unspoken truth hanging in the air. Some loves don't belong to the world, they belong only to memory. And though it ended, I know a part of me will always remember the man who taught me that even forbidden feelings can still be real.